Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Korra video. This one's going to be my speculation as we head into Legend of Korra, Ruins of the Empire Part 2. I like to do these speculation videos fairly early on after the previous part, just so, it's before like the preview pages and stuff like that come out. Just because a lot of times the preview pages give you a very clear direction about where the book is heading, and I like to do the speculation beforehand. So we'll jump straight in with the description that we have for Ruins of the Empire Part 2. What will it take to stop a war? King Wu's dreams of peacefully transitioning the Earth Kingdom into a democracy are in danger when Commander Guan throws his political hat in the ring, hoping to subvert the new system from the inside out. But playing fair was never part of his plan. Guan and Dr. Sheng are using terrifying new technology to cement Guan's win. In a desperate attempt to save the Earth Kingdom from falling back into the dark days of conquest and empire, Korra and Kuvira convince an old friend to return and take the former commander on in the polls. But will it be enough? So what's interesting about this description, which we've had for a while, now after Part 1, is that most of this is just a summary of what happens in Part 1. There's very little new information here after Part 1, which I find very interesting, in that the democracy thing, that's entirely set up in Part 1. Guan and Dr. Sheng terrifying new technology. We now know that is brainwashing. And yeah, in an attempt to counter Guan now being the main candidate in Gaoling, Korra is planning to get Toph to return and take on Guan in the polls. So that's pretty interesting. I think the first thing I want to point out here is just with regards to the wording at the end there. Korra and Kuvira convince an old friend to return, but will it be enough? Are they saying there that it's not an attempt, but that it actually works? Because I think that's going to be fairly telling. Like, these descriptions, like, how much can you really read into them at times? But is this one confirming to us that the person that they try to convince gets convinced? Because I think that if that happens, then I think that takes away a lot of speculation. Because I think a lot of people were speculating after Part 1 that, there's no way Toph's actually going to, want to join in this election. Just the way her character is last time we saw it, she's not going to be wanting to get involved in world affairs, getting involved back in the thick of things again, even if it is her hometown. But this seems to be suggesting that they do get it to happen. Now, it's obviously being a little vague there in that maybe Toph does refuse and they convince another old friend to return. Because the other thing is Korra and Kuvira both convince an old friend. So if Toph refuses straight away, the obvious candidate would be Su Yin. And because of that, because of the wording of Korra and Kuvira convince an old friend, and they don't specify if it's just Korra's friend or Kuvira's friend, because you wouldn't say Kuvira is friends with Toph. You would say it for Korra, and you would say that Korra and Kuvira are both, we would consider Su Yin sort of an old friend in a way. So I think that's probably more the direction that they're taking. Toph is going to be involved in this book, but I don't think she will actually participate in the way we think that the end of the book is going to have her participate. If it is Su who's running Gaoling, that has me questioning what's up with Zhao Fu in the elections, because they never confirmed a lot of that stuff. They never confirmed the specific details on stuff like that. Is Zhao Fu just allowed to stay as it is because it didn't have to be stabilized or anything like that? If so, does that mean Zhao Fu has to have an election to decide on a leader? Because if that's the case, I assume Su would want to run there, but maybe actually Su is perfectly fine letting someone else take over. Because, while we consider her the leader of Zhao Fu, like, I suppose her technical position has never really been, like, she's not the president. She doesn't have any specific title as leader because she doesn't like world leaders. She's more of just like, she's accepting that, she's obviously one of the high ups in Zhao Fu's society and is kind of the leader by default because the people accept that. So in a way you can almost say like she's already sort of been elected as the leader. But I suppose if she does want to go for Gaoling just to counter Guan, it leaves it open for someone else to take over in Zhao Fu, potentially. The other thoughts I had on that, and just directly, the election side of things. We'll get to Kuvira. I'm saving Kuvira for the end because she's going to be obviously the main talking point here, and I want to give myself all the time possible at the end. So I'll cover all the other stuff first, and then we'll discuss Kuvira. But other candidates, like, okay, Guan is going to go up against Toph or Su Yin. That's going to be the actual fight, basically. I don't think the other two are going to get any votes at all, because the idea was that they're just so boring as candidates, they're not going to get anything. So Guan and Dr. Sheng are brainwashing people to vote for Guan. There's only a couple of days until the actual election, so they've got to do that quick, but obviously if they do enough of it, they're going to win by default. I think regardless of who or how popular someone is, that's going to work. Now, they're obviously planning to counter that by having someone who's just so popular, so well known, that it's going to be difficult for people not to be like, oh, Toph is up for election? Of course I'm going to vote for Toph. Everyone knows Toph. And Su might have the same impact, especially if Toph is kind of there, but even if she's not up for running, but she's there to sort of support the election in her hometown. So that's going to be interesting. The other, I think this is where Bolin comes in actually as well, because what's been interesting about part 1, and it's not mentioned in any of the descriptions because it's more the side plot, Bolin is now working for Zhu Li. He is her assistant. He doesn't seem to like this role, and Mako specifically points that out. It's specifically noted in that scene that this doesn't appear to be, again, Bolin finding himself again. This might be another thing, like acting, like pro bending, like being part of Kuvira's army, like being a cop, that Bolin just tries, is okay at, but ultimately it's not for him. So when is Bolin going to find the thing that is perfect for him? And what are they doing with this arc? Someone so capable, such a likable character, what are they going to do with him? There's also the fact that they set up in part 1, Wu primarily, but also Korra, are a little disappointed about, before they found out about Guan and bring in, like, they want to bring Toph in, they realize that, the potential thing we haven't thought about here is just that the same people who were involved with politics before we're going for democracy are just going to go up for election this time. We could be left with a situation where we just have the same old people in charge and nothing changes. They just get a few people elected instead of all these people. And they want some new political blood in the race. I don't necessarily think that is Toph in terms of really making changes. This is more of like, we're doing this just to directly counter Commander Guan. So in terms of someone who actually has better ideals and would be a better politician, I'm half thinking Bolin running for election somewhere. If it's not confirmed that like Toph or Su for sure is the one to take on Commander Guan, I actually think Bolin could be a good option. He's the young, new political blood that they need. He has the same sort of fame factor that a Toph would have, in that, obviously, former pro bender, former mover star. How many people in the world at this point can say that they are a mover star? Bolin is one of them, so he would be well known by everyone. He's obviously a very powerful earthbender, has lava bending, so he's notable. I assume it could be known at this point that he is actually, like, has his origins from the Earth Kingdom, Ba Sing Se. It might work out in his favor, actually, that he's from a family where, like, his brother's a firebender and stuff like that, that they're related to Team Avatar and stuff like that. He sort of has a connection to the Beifongs as well, because he's dating Opal. It could all roll together to be perfect for Bolin to be, like, also sort of the celebrity candidate. And then if it turns out that this is what he's meant to do, that's really, really interesting. Like, what are Bolin's political views on things? Because I think the one thing they set up with him being part of Kuvira's army was that the thing he liked the most was giving the sort of helping people out, the kind of humanitarian aid that they offered once they came to an agreement. He didn't like a lot of the, planting the army on the doorstep and intimidating people. That was the stuff he didn't really like and wasn't for. But he did like the helping people part of things. The politics, I suppose, is a way for him to sort of try and do that. And it's a way for him to, like, use some of the talents that he does have to get people on his side. And that, like, sure, like, how much confidence would you have in a Bolin giving, like, a political speech necessarily? I'm not sure, but at the same time, we don't know. He's able to sort of get a crowd on his side, and because like you usually see him as more the comedic character, you probably don't actually know what his thoughts are on some of this more kind of political stuff. So even if it's not directly in the main plot of like he runs in Gaoling, I could see them using Bolin somewhere else in terms of going for the election somewhere along the line, or just getting into politics himself. That could be the direction that they go with him. And I primarily say that just because I think the scene with Wu and Korra talking about New Political Blood is actually sort of an important one there, along with the fact that Bolin's arc, if it's not connected to any of that, kind of feels very just on its own out there. Like, what exactly are they going for? Like, yes, Bolin is there to sort of present Opal's opinions on like the Beifong family, you know, while you don't necessarily have the Beifong siblings there. He's obviously the natural one because he's dating Opal to give that opinion, because no one else there has necessarily can give like Wei or Wing's opinions, Huan's and stuff like that. So I think that makes the most sense. So that's an option that definitely I think is very, very interesting, and just to see if they include Bolin in things that little bit more than they currently are. Because Toph, I really don't know what to speculate on what exactly they're going to do, outside of the fact that I do think they will have Toph speak to Kuvira. I think there could be some very interesting Toph and Kuvira scenes, in that Toph ultimately was the one who I think really helped Korra. And on a similar note, because Korra and Kuvira have that similarity, Toph could actually be the one to help Kuvira. I think Toph is going to potentially want to help Kuvira, because like someone that powerful at earth bending, at metal bending, you know, that's Toph's type of person. If she can help Kuvira be a better person, I think Toph would want to do that. And maybe even if it's a bit antagonistic because of what Kuvira did to her family, I still think Toph is going to give her some piece of advice that could help her. And I think that's an interesting dynamic, especially with them noting here Korra and Kuvira convince an old friend, and Kuvira is going to be brought along. And if it's referring to Toph or Sue, I'm not sure, because again, like even though we know that the suggestion at the end of part 1 is Toph initially from Korra, I still think it's an option that Toph still would refuse, and they'd have to switch to Su Yin, because Su Yin has to come back into the story at some point somehow. And I think just her finding out that Team Avatar has brought Kuvira with them is probably enough to just get Su Yin back into things, because she's going to be probably annoyed about that. Like, why would you do that? And Korra's going to have to argue that, like, we need Kuvira. I know you're frustrated with her, but we need her here. And that's a way for, like, Sue then connects herself that I want to be here with you to see what she's like and monitor her more and stuff like that. I think that's how Sue gets back into things. And then maybe we get her involved in the more political side of things, because she seems to be potentially a more suited candidate than Toph. Because if with Sue specifically, and I suppose I'll talk about this a little bit when I'm talking about Kuvira and Sue, because that's the main dynamic, is just specifically on this side of things. Will they come back to the fact that, like, a lot of this started because Sue didn't want to step in to stabilize the Earth Kingdom. She didn't want to be seen to, like, forcing her opinions on the entire nation. She didn't want to potentially start a war. And it was her refusing that offer from Tenzin and Raiko to take over that caused Kuvira to do what she did. Is there some sense of, like, Sue stepping up and taking a role in the Earth Kingdom by running for election that could, you know, get her back on track, have Kuvira see her differently, or from like a responsibility point of view, like seeing like, oh, Sue is taking this responsibility on to be a leader within this nation, even though she herself doesn't particularly like leaders. Who knows? Because in that case, you borderline take out Sue and Toph as being candidates, because Sue doesn't like leaders, and like we don't know what her real opinion is on like democracy. Like, does she still not like the fact that there is a leader, full stop, or what? But you know, Toph doesn't seem suited. Sue might have her own problems with that. There could be a lot of stuff going on here. So yeah, I think that covers a lot of stuff there, like Bolin, a lot of the kind of political stuff. Guan and Dr. Shang, I think we will just get scenes of them, you know, continuing to brainwash people. We'll see him probably out in the campaign trail, and it will seem like he is super, super popular with the things he's saying because he has his brainwashed supporters there, acting like he's the greatest thing ever. I think part 2 will be where it is discovered that he is doing this, and I think this will probably begin to explain why Kuvira is on the front cover of part 2 wearing an Earth Empire soldier uniform. Because there's no reason for her to do that otherwise, unless she is either going undercover into the re-education facility on the outskirts of Gaoling, Guan's base, or like the book sort of set up, part 1 sort of set up, potentially they want to re-educate Kuvira to get her thinking the way they are, and maybe that happens. Maybe they capture Kuvira, re-educate her with the brainwashing, and she becomes one of the soldiers on Guan's side. Maybe that's it. But either way, I think I'd probably lean more towards as part of the investigation to discover the plot, because there's a reason I think the terrifying new technology is mentioned is because the hero characters will discover it at some point, and I think somehow them going undercover and Kuvira specifically going undercover is going to be a key part of that. Go in there, try and take out the brainwashing stuff, and that will leave the election to be more fair, and we'll see how it goes. Again, I think the piece of the plot that I'm not sure exactly what way they'll go with it is the entirety of Runes of the Empire going to solely be focused around just the Gaoling election, and then the rest of them will more or less be implied to have happened off screen? Or are we actually going to see the result of the Gaoling election in part 2, and then part 3 might be a bit of a more montage to see what the results are? Again, I'm not sure, because you could end something in terms of a long-term storytelling, but the Earth Empire doesn't, the goal isn't accomplished the way Guan wants, where he wants basically Earth Empire to win every seat. What if they only get a handful, and it's just, here is a political party now within the Earth Kingdom, it is the Earth Empire. They only have a handful of seats, but they are an honest political party at that point. That could be one way to go about it, but I'm not sure. I do get the feeling, just with the scope of some of these books, that it probably will just be the Gaoling one, and we'll see the result of that. The Earth Empire plan probably won't work out, and it will be more about Kuvira having done so much to prevent it from happening as part of her redemption, in a way. Mako, I think apart from him being here, I don't really think we'll see too much of him. I think a lot of people have questions about, okay, his hand is injured. I think he said, he can't quite firebend from it in the last series. Will they do anything with that with regards to, can he firebend out of his injured arm? What sort of an impact is the injury going to have going forward? And then maybe in the next comic series we can have more of a focus on him and start to, do more with him and not just have him be the sort of... And of course Mako's there because he's a member of the team type thing. Because Bolin obviously has more going on. I think Asami actually has a little bit more going on in this book as well. Because I think Asami and Kuvira, that dynamic actually might end up being fairly important to Kuvira's growth as a character, because I think Asami is the one who is most in need, or I think Kuvira needs to apologize to the most, because Kuvira killed Hiroshi. Kuvira killed Asami's father. And even though she's talked to her a bunch in part 1, Kuvira didn't say anything to Asami about it, just acted like nothing had happened, oh, I apologize to everyone for what I did, and that's enough, apparently. That's the problem. I think that's why I put a lot of significance on Asami's line in part 1 of her saying that I believe people can change and be redeemed, but no one changes in a day, like Kuvira says. Kuvira's oh, I've changed immediately, I've decided to do something. That doesn't mean she's full on changed, and I think that's the important thing. So if Kuvira can do anything to sort of convince Asami that there's hope for her, and Asami really is willing to give Kuvira a chance, that is going to be a very telling one, because Asami is the most doubtful, I think, of Kuvira's intentions. So if Kuvira can get Asami on her side in any way, that is a big kind of growth moment, I think. Because, Kuvira's, I suppose, biggest advocate at this point in time is Korra, because of the similarity between the two, and her biggest opponent would be Asami. So if Asami gets on the same page as Korra about Kuvira, that's your sign of growth for sure. Other than that, rest of the Beifongs, actually, I think, before we get into the Kuvira part of this, I think Bataar Jr., at some point over the course of this series, you are going to have to address that relationship, and if Kuvira felt anything towards him, and, you know, it just in terms of, like, longer term, like, if they do actually both care about each other, then that is a relationship that you can potentially see getting back together, depending on whatever way they go with ending Kuvira here, of, like, is she just in prison forever, or are we doing something different here to allow her to actually, like, be a character going forward and not just be like a here where we go to every so often because he knows something that no one else knows. Because I don't really feel you can just do that with Kuvira, of just like she's in prison forever and we just go to speak to her whenever. So I think that's why, like, stuff like in any way her interacting with Bataar Jr. is going to be important. I think Opal at some point probably will come in to present some sort of an opinion. Maybe Wei Wing, Huan, not as much, because I think Sue is the main Beifong that they're going to, you know, focus on with regards to Kuvira, of course. Toph will have some role, I think. They've mentioned Opal, so I think Opal will get something along the way, but we'll have to wait and see on that. So I suppose let's now get into Kuvira for the rest of this video. Let's focus the rest of this on Kuvira and the growth of this character, what they're actually going to do here. Because part 1 I thought was a very interesting and intriguing read for Kuvira, because every scene she was in presented an aspect of the story without going super in-depth. And it definitely gave you a sense that, like, okay, they're going for something here. They're planting the seeds. And then part 2 and 3 are going to be what really deliver on that story. So there are a couple of things that they did in part 1. One was they started off a little bit of a backstory here. And the backstory is purposely meant to be vague. They don't give you all the details. They don't give you full context. They leave it vague to allow you to interpret it in a variety of different ways. Because the scene in the past is very similar to the present day scene that she's dealing with, in the sense of Kuvira and accepting responsibility for her past actions and what she's done. And that's what the scene of Little Kuvira is about, and it's in a way what the entirety of this book is about. The one scene in this book between Kuvira and Su Yin is at the end of the trial sequence. It is Su Yin confronting Kuvira about her pleading not guilty. And, you know, we'll get into the I suppose, specific analysis of that in a second, but the main thing to say in that is that at the very end of it, Sue says, you've apologized, but you need to take responsibility for what you've done. That's the last thing that is said to her before we get the scenes of the flashback, which gives you the idea that the flashback is coming into Kuvira's head because of what was said to her. So that's important. So she's thinking about responsibilities, and this is what springs to mind for her, which gives you the sense that the interpretation you're kind of meant to have about that scene is that it is more on Kuvira. Kuvira is a flawed character, and here is a scene showing that even back when she was younger. I think that's kind of the way they're asking you to think about it. Again, I don't think we can honestly just be like, for sure that's the way it is, but I think that's the way the book is sort of asking you to think about it, at least for now. And then it also asks other things, in that anytime Sue is brought up, anytime Kuvira's experience living with Sue is brought up, it's always this like sense of Sue provided for her, she took her in when she was 8, she grew and advanced to become the Zhaofu captain of the guard. Opal tried to be friends with her, Kuvira pushed her away. All these like little things, it's like, okay, so you're presenting the idea that it seems like, again, it's Kuvira's fault. Everyone tried to be very nice to Kuvira and incorporate her into the family, but she pushed them away. It's Kuvira's issue. Kuvira is seeming to say that she had a different experience than they interpret it as. I don't really think it has anything on Opal. I think the Opal thing is like, Kuvira because of her interactions and the way Sue treated her when she was younger, took that approach with the rest of her, quote-unquote siblings, and was cold and distant from them because of whatever the dynamic was with Sue. And the entire mystery that's been the case, I think, since book 4, it's always been a criticism I've had of book 4, and now it seems like they're bringing it to the forefront and being like, we know you wanted this, let's tease it some more and then finally deliver on it, is what was the dynamic? What type of mother was Sue to Kuvira? Because we know what Sue was like as a mother to Opal. It seems like she was a little bit overprotective, the idea that like Toph gave Sue a little bit too much freedom and she got out of hand, so Sue was a little bit more protective over Opal, borderline to the point where she was a little bit controlling of her life. But when Opal did speak out and was, honest about how she felt, what she wanted to do, that she was passionate about becoming an airbender, Sue accepted it ultimately, and it was very reasonable and nicely done because of good communication. Now, that doesn't immediately say that was the type of mother Sue was to Kuvira, in that Kuvira is directly saying that is not, it was different to that. So what was the dynamic like? And it's hard to, I think it's very difficult to judge it based off the scenes that Kuvira and Sue have together, because there's 2 scenes in book 3 prior to villain Kuvira of Kuvira and Sue interacting, and one of them is just like Sue is going off to the Lahima's Peak battle against the Red Lotus, and Kuvira is like, I want to come too. Sue says, no, you stay behind. And ultimately Kuvira ends up staying behind and saving Tonrock when he falls off the cliff. And it just seemed like, okay, like, was there a little bit of an argument there? Is the sense of like, is Sue holding Kuvira back? But no, I suppose it's more the idea of like, they had enough important people going into the really dangerous fight. We need someone to lead this sort of backup group, kind of. Again, you can interpret that in different ways, but there didn't really seem to be any like Kuvira was like furious about this. It was just like, okay, that's fine, that's your decision, I will accept it. And it ended up working out because it allowed Kuvira and her group to sort of save people who did fall. So that's fairly fine. The other one is like we see Kuvira in the like kind of the introduction to Su Yin sequence, the whole metal interpretive dance thing that they have going on. Kuvira is like a part of that, and it seems like, oh, fine. But again, it is a little bit of a reveal in book 4 when it's like, oh no, she's like my daughter, I adopted her when she was 8. It's kind of like, huh? Like, they don't really seem that close, but again, it's because we don't really see many scenes where they would obviously need to show that they're close. The other problem is that any scenes that we do have, like showing their issues with each other, it's after this rift has happened. So you don't get that much of a sense of what their dynamic is, because it primarily is them interacting based on their like job positions of like, Sue is in command because she's like the leader of Zaofu, and Kuvira is her captain of the guard, so of course she's going to go by Sue's orders. We don't get a sense of like personally what their dynamic was, apart from the few scenes that we do get. And I think that's where it kind of comes in that like Korra is the one to ask Su Yin about this. This is why Korra knows that Kuvira was an orphan in the final episode. How did things get so bad between you and Kuvira? I thought she was your protege. She was more than that. She was like a daughter to me. I took her in when she was 8 years old and nourished her talents. Kuvira was smart, a natural leader, and quickly rose through the ranks. I saw myself in her. And that's an interesting point, because you would also say that in the same way that this book is definitely going down the direction of saying that taking responsibility for your actions and Kuvira not doing that is like the theme that they're going for with what Kuvira needs to learn and go through. That is also something you can apply to Su Yin from the past with regards to her youth, joining the Terra Triad, kind of borderline going down a criminal path, that causing Lin as a becoming police officer to have to arrest her, and creating that problem for Toph, which resulted in sending Su Yin away, Toph eventually stepping down as chief of police, and that creating the issue between Lin and Sue, which Lin would say it was Sue not accepting responsibility for what she did in the past, and then Sue resolving things with her mother behind like Lin's back without actually resolving them with Lin, and then being like, oh, I'm changed, I'm a different person now, but she hasn't shown Lin that yet, and is brushed aside as a thing of the past. And their fight and all that growth for Lin and Sue in book 3 needed to happen to get them to this point now. Now, I don't immediately think you can apply all of that to Sue and Kuvira, that Sue needs to take responsibility for what she did, because we don't really have that much evidence that she really did all that much wrong. Because again, the rift that happens between them is explored in this exact same scene in book 4. She says, 3 years ago, after the fall of the Earth Queen, Raiko and Tenzin came to see me. And Raiko says, the Earth Kingdom is in chaos, there's a vacuum of power, and I'm concerned about what will happen if someone doesn't take control of the situation. Su Yin says, and you think I should be the one. Tenzin says, you're perfect to take charge. The world leaders trust you, and as a Beifong, you have credibility in the Earth Kingdom. Su Yin says, I'm honored that you thought of me, but I'm not interested in imposing my ideals on an entire nation. I'm afraid I can't help you. Kuvira speaks up at this point and says, Su Yin, I know this isn't my place, but I think you should do this. Zhao Fu has always been a beacon of modern progress, and now you can share that with everyone. Su Yin says, what would you have me do? March into Bossing Say with an army? Would be seen as conquerors and greeted with nothing but war. Kuvira says, there are already wars. The Earth Queen nearly destroyed our nation. This is our opportunity to change things. It's not going to happen. So it gets a little tense, but I think Sue argues her point perfectly fine there. This was not... I think Raiko and Tenzin both went in knowing that it probably is a lot to ask someone to just step in, become the center point of, like, you are taking over the Earth Kingdom for a certain amount of time. That is a lot of pressure to put on someone, and especially someone of Su Yin's like beliefs, that she doesn't particularly like world leaders herself. So them asking her to like become one just because she's had success with Zhao Fu, it's a little much. And obviously from Kuvira's point of view, this creates the issue because this is Su Yin not stepping up to her responsibility, but that's just Kuvira, I suppose, accepting the fact that she believes that it's Su Yin's responsibility, and then it's her responsibility to do it, which is why she does what she does. But it was never like a thing that I wouldn't overly criticize Su Yin for this decision, because I think it was a lot to ask of her, and what she says is like, what do you want me to do? Just be like a conqueror, go in, like take over? Which is what Kuvira does, and the idea would be that like Su Yin has grown enough, like accepting her responsibilities, to understand that, you know, thinking of this through, I'd just be the great uniter, and that's exactly the way Kuvira goes. So, like, I'm not going to say like it's Su Yin did nothing wrong in their dynamic, but I think the book, and even the book 4 stuff, is presenting us the idea that there is at least something on Kuvira's side of this dynamic that does need to change. That Kuvira can make the point all she wants that Su Yin wasn't the greatest mother to her and stuff like that, but fundamentally a lot of what's happened is because of decisions Kuvira has made and how she's, you know, made her choices when it comes to accepting responsibility. And this is where I suppose the flashback scene comes in of little Kuvira. I'll bring up actually the stuff from the last episode of Book 4, the finale, where I suppose Korra and Kuvira had the talk. Because it's interesting in that borderline the two scenes seem to contradict each other. The big thing being that, like, we don't know the full context for the flashback scene because it's only part of it. It's purposely meant to be a vague flashback scene that we'll get more of. But yeah, Korra and Kuvira have their talk, you know, I guess I see a lot of myself in you. We're nothing alike. We're both fierce and determined to succeed, sometimes without thinking things through. You brought this on yourself. You know, you had to know that what you were doing wasn't right. Kuvira says, I was trying to help my people. Sue turned her back on the Earth Kingdom. You were gone. I had to do something. And Korra says, I think I get it now. You don't understand anything about me. I do. Sue told me how she took you in when you were younger. It must have been so hard being an orphan. And this is the important line from Kuvira. Don't pretend you know what it felt like. The Avatar is adored by millions. I was cast aside by my own parents like I meant nothing to them. How could I just stand by and watch the same thing happen to my nation when it needed someone to guide it? And that's when you bring in the flashback sequence that we get. And I understand that it is a very vague interpretation of it, but like, there is an interpretation of that flashback sequence that is like, is she lying here? And that the truth of it is that she actually ran away because she didn't accept responsibility for breaking that vase, and then blamed her parents for being like strict or annoyed about it. I don't think that's the full story, but the idea is that the flashback scene here is obviously her thinking about, you know, responsibility and stuff like that, and then what she does afterwards is her like trying to affect some sort of change because of that. And this is the flashback scene that we get. Kuvira's father says, "We know you broke the vase, Kuvira. Admit it." And she says, "No, I didn't do anything. I want my toys. You'll get them back when you start behaving. Let me out. It's for your own good. I'll show you," as Kuvira breaks down the wall with earthbending, and her parents say, "Kuvira, get back here." And she says, "Make me." And then we know there's more to this. Michelle Wong posted a piece of art that isn't featured in part 1, so we know it's from part 2 or 3. That is little Kuvira, so more flashback that we get. And it appears to be little Kuvira in the back of some sort of like carriage or something like that. So she's continuing running away. She actually full on runs away. She doesn't just like go outside and come back. Now the idea here is then, okay, speculation. What are the ways that this can actually go? Because we know eventually Kuvira looks to be in or around 8 at this point in time. I wouldn't say she looks that much younger if that is something that is the case. But I think I can see 3 scenarios. One, what they're showing here is just a sequence where she runs away and then comes back to her parents, and then something else happens where they abandon her. They cast her aside, like she says in book 4. 2, she runs away, comes back after a certain amount of time, but her parents have moved on. Her parents have... Maybe she doesn't go to speak to them properly or anything like that. She just sees from a distance that they're like happy, they've moved on, they don't appear outwardly to miss her, and she interprets this as that they cast her aside, that they didn't look for her, or that they didn't care about her enough to try and find her. And so she officially runs away after this, and that's when Su Yin finds her. The other way is that it plays out as we suspect. She runs away here, and this is like the last time she sees her parents, and then she is found somewhere along the way of running away by Su Yin and brought in. Now, I don't think it's going to be the first one. It to me feels a little weird with what thematically you're trying to do, that it's the situation where like she runs away, comes back, and then something else happens. So I'd probably take that out of the equation, and I think it will be one of the other 2 options, that she runs away, comes back, and it seems like her parents have moved on, and it's maybe been a couple of weeks, maybe a month or 2, and so she properly runs away there, thinking that her parents have abandoned her, left her behind, or whatever. The other one is that, like, yes, she runs away here, and this is the last time she sees her parents, and that what she says here is like a lie that she tells to herself, that she was cast aside, she was abandoned by her parents, when in fact it was her own problems that led to that happening. She was the one who ran away. Let's assume for a second she did break the vase. In that, like, the line of dialogue specifically is like, "We know you broke it," so it's kind of like whether or not we're meant to interpret that as her parents just being overly strict and not actually knowing, but let's assume that she did, to thematically bring the book together, that she's being accused of crimes that she committed as the Great Uniter, which she did commit, and she's guilty of, but she hasn't accepted responsibility for. And thematically, logically, you'd say that in the past, here's just an example of that to connect her past to her present. So she broke it, and she runs away. That tells you something about the character if that's the approach that they're going to take with it. That, whoa, she left her parents just over that accusation. And even if you go back further into the flashback and her parents were like super strict on her and stuff like that, like, unless you're willing to really vilify her parents, it's, I think, going to be difficult to make you be like incredibly sympathetic towards Kuvira and not have you see a flaw in her. And I think that's the entire point of this, is to show that Kuvira is flawed in some way and that she needs to kind of grow past it. And even though all these years later, it's still something that she deals with and hasn't fully accepted. And if it is as simple as just, like Sue said, accepting responsibility for what she's done. Now, there also could be a side of things where Sue Yin wasn't the most effective mother when she did took her in. But I think that is more of a personal thing for Sue. And, you know, does she, like... This is where I think at some point you are going to have to address what the dynamic was. We have to see a scene of Sue taking Kuvira in and just dealing with a moment of, like, being a mother to her, and what that was like, and how it was different to the way she treated her actual children. Again, all living in the same house, but somehow being treated differently. Was it just stuff that Kuvira herself kept herself from being officially part of the family? Or, like she says, did Sue do something to sort of create a bit of a rift to where Kuvira didn't feel comfortable, you know, joining the family in that way? And that's ultimately what it comes down to. I think the book is trying to make you feel sympathetic to a degree about Kuvira, in that you want her to redeem herself and you want her to move on and grow because she's an interesting character. But I think the book also wants to create the idea that she is flawed, that she is responsible for these bad things that she's done, and that her blaming it on other people basically is a kind of a problem. Even if other characters somehow even if all that stuff together, like other characters like sort of led her down this path, that fundamentally she always had a choice. And I think it's very similar to the Azula situation here, where, like, I think everyone wants to see Azula redeemed to some degree. The exact degree is where sort of the debate comes in, but they want to see her kind of change, because with Azula, you understand that, you know, a part of why she is the way she is to such an extreme degree, is that her father very much, you know, amplified these aspects of her. She was always like that. She's always is the character that she is, but her father did amplify things that way, and it wouldn't exactly say she grew up in the most ideal circumstances, and so some of why she is the way she is out of her control, but that she did have choices along the way that, you know, means you can only be so sympathetic, but you want to see her grow. It's similar to the Zuko situation as well. You were frustrated with him at so many points, but you always gave him that opportunity. And I think that's this book. That's why, like, stuff like the Asami dynamic is going to be important for Kuvira. If Asami is willing to give Kuvira a chance, that will be a key moment. If Bolin, if Mako are willing to give her that chance, that shows she has changed. But right now, the idea is that she does need to change. And I think that's why that Asami moment is actually very, very significant. And it's meant to sort of be, like, I suppose, the true way of seeing Kuvira. And how much she has or has not accepted those responsibilities for what she's done. It's, I think, very interesting, because Kuvira as well, like, she is who she is and is able to do what she's done because of Sue. Like, you see that in her speech in the coronation. She actually mentions Sue. She says in her speech, growing up in Zaofu with Sue Beifong, I learned that the idea of a royal family passing a title from one generation to the next was archaic, and that technology and innovation should be what drives a nation forward. That's interesting, that, like, even after all this stuff has happened and she has issues with Sue, she still ultimately comes back to the fact that, like, what she learned from Sue in Zaofu are kind of these defining traits for her that she just takes too far in an effort to make up for Sue, in her mind, like, abandoning the nation. And I think they do need to inform that over the course of these books. Inform that final scene of, is that just an emotional Kuvira lying to herself about what happened with her parents, or what? Because I borderline can't see the flashback, how it gets from this point to a moment where it is 100% true that her parents cast her aside, that, like, she comes back, and I suppose that maybe that's it, thinking about it right now. Maybe she does come back and her parents are like, who are you? and they are kind of like, we're glad you left. Maybe they do go full villain with the parents on that front, and that causes her to have to leave properly because her parents won't accept her back. Again, like, will they go that like cruel with the parents or not? I'm not sure, because like, do you run the risk of making her too sympathetic if you do it that way? But if you don't have any sympathy and there's no meaning behind the whole I was cast aside by my parents as being the emotional backbone behind what she was doing, then it makes this bad stuff that she did even worse if she had no like deep down justified reason for doing what she was doing, had no motivation behind it. Right now, that motivation is that she felt vulnerable when she was younger because of, in the Earth Kingdom, what her parents did to her, and so she wanted to help everyone else in the Earth Kingdom to never feel that way again. Like, there was always someone there for them, unlike what she had, and that is why she did what she did. That's what she did what she did to such an insane degree. And that's what's so amazing and complex about Runes of the Empire. Now, ultimately, it is all about how many scenes they have with Kuvira and the flashback. Kuvira and Sue talking to each other. Characters like Toph, Korra, Asami talking to Kuvira and getting her to a point where she does develop. This is very much a case of you need to give Kuvira a lot of screen time, a lot of scenes. You need to let Kuvira be emotional when she needs to be very open about this, and not just be the sort of, prideful character who will just, sit in the middle of all these people who she's hurt and not once apologize or say anything to them too. Because it's stuff like that I think needs to change. She needs to be able to go up to Asami and apologize for what she did to Hiroshi. She needs to be able to apologize to Bolin for treating him so bad. All those sort of things. And I think, most importantly, she needs to, apologize to Su Yin. Like, even if Su Yin has, there's some valid reason for Sue to be like, she wasn't a very good mother to me, there's still a sense that, she still needs to apologize for what she did properly. Have an actual heart-to-heart with her. Because I really don't think there's going to be any, insanely bad reveal on Su Yin's part. Maybe she did treat Kuvira a little bit differently, but I think the book is trying to get across the idea that Kuvira, a lot of it is just stuff of her own making, and that, okay, some bad stuff did happen to her along the way, but she was given all these chances and never really took them, and now, here, after everything that's happened, is the key moment for that to happen. The other scene I want to bring up, probably the final scene, is just when she's talking to Guan, and they eventually get around to discuss the Earth Empire. It's an interesting scene because Kuvira seems to accept, okay, I can accept that the Earth Empire accomplished something in that everyone will benefit from what we've done, even if we're not in charge right now. Everyone will benefit from what we did accomplish up to now, and that the grand experiments come to an end, and we have to accept that. And she says in response to Guan saying, no, we need even more progress. We need to grow and accomplish even more. Kuvira says, I've seen what lies at the end of that path, death and destruction. It's very dramatic. And I think it's meant to get across the idea of how big of an impact Korra saving Kuvira from her own spirit weapon was. And her, in reflection, realizing how bad she got to as the Great Uniter because of, I think, especially that weapon and the power that it had and what damage it could have done, given that she saw it up close. She saw the only person in the world capable of blocking that blast, block the blast that would have otherwise killed her. And she realizes that I was going down the path of basically being willing to vaporize people to get what I wanted. And that's how, focusing on pure progress for the sake of progress, taking any morals or anything like that out of it, that I suppose that's what she sees Guan doing, and it, especially I think Kuvira's reaction to what Guan is doing, the brainwashing, is going to be very interesting from that perspective of is that going to be the point that she makes, that she realizes he's lost it too, he's brainwashing people for the sake of the Earth Empire, which is similar to the fact that she was willing to vaporize people with spirit weapons. Is that what they're going for there? Because Korra, to kind of convince people to like side with her and like, you know, Kuvira should be involved with this, does mention what's the specific term? It's in the bathhouse scene. It's when I visited her in prison, I could see that she's still broken. I think she really wants to redeem herself in the eyes of the world. I say we give her that chance. Korra interpreting Kuvira there as being kind of broken, I think is sort of... It's definitely an interesting one because you can see she is sort of lost in thought about her past, Su Yin, the trial. She's in a very tough spot with everything that's going on here. She thinks everyone is against her, which is true to a degree, but obviously it's she can't quite see that she has done a lot to deserve everyone being against her. And it's, I think, gaining that understanding, that clarity is going to be important going forward. And so, yeah, so I think Su is the most important one there. I think the fact that she has someone who's similar to her, like Korra, supporting her is a help as well. I think Toph is going to be important because just presenting that, you know, advice from, you know, kind of peers in terms of like both super high-end, powerful earth and metal benders. I think there's going to be a sort of respect that could appear between those two that could help. And then Asami. I think Asami and Kuvira is going to be an interesting dynamic. Plus, if they bring in the likes of Tar Jr. or Opal at some point. So I think that's most of the speculation I want to talk about in this one. I think this is one when the preview comes out, I will do a more in-depth discussion. If the preview presents us enough information. Again, when the Google Books preview comes out, it's like, oh, here's half the book. So I usually don't do more speculation after that, because it's like, if we're discussing half the book, we might as well just, you know, wait for the full book to come out. But, you know, when we get the actual preview pages and if they're interesting enough, we'll probably do more speculation on it. But right now, I think the book's in an interesting spot in that there's a lot open for discussion because it's so clear they're going to try and do a lot here. It's just interpretation of that backstory, what way are we meant to have it? Has Su done anything wrong? Is it all on Kuvira, or is it actually... There is stuff to blame, like Kuvira's parents are going to be revealed to have done something very wrong. Su is going to be revealed to have done something wrong. I'm not sure. How sympathetic are we meant to be towards Kuvira is the big question. So yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.